my name is Sydney and today I am so excited for the book that we're going to be talking about. Dune by Frank Herbert. So this book was written in the 60s and it actually inspired Star Wars, Game of Thrones, and for those of you who haven't heard of Dune before, it's basically Game of Thrones but set in space. It is epic. This was actually my favorite read of 2021. I can't tell you just how good it was. Frank Herbert is such an incredible writer. Like, he is actually incredible. I enjoyed reading this book the entire way through. Yes, there were some bits that were a bit dense because it is quite a big book, but it was never boring. It was just dense in the fact that there's a lot going on and Frank is incredible at story building, character building. His writing is just so beautiful. You can picture everything in the finest detail, and I think for me that's something I'm so drawn to with reading, being able to fully visualize this world. If you can't tell, I freaking loved this book so much. And it was really cute because I was actually reading this with my boyfriend. We were reading it at the same time, marking off at different chapters to talk about it together. Or we would actually, when we were together, we would read in the same room. It was honestly super special. I don't think I've ever properly had like a book pal, someone who's with me every step of the way reading. And especially such a big book like this. This is almost 1,000 pages. It was so special and I feel so grateful to have shared that with him. If you haven't read this book, I could not recommend it more. I did want to read something from the afterword for those of you who still want a bit more as to what this book is about. Dune is the most admired science fiction novel ever written and has sold tens of millions of copies all over the world in more than 20 languages. It is to science fiction what the Lord of the Rings trilogy is to fantasy, the most highly regarded, respected works in their respective genres. Of course, Dune is not just science fiction. It includes strong elements of fantasy and contains so many important layers beneath the storyline that it has become a mainstream classic. And I love that because I'm never gonna forget this story. I'm never gonna forget my experience reading this book. It's so good. It's so good. You have to read it if you haven't. I'll also say that this book is sectioned off into 3 parts, so I will, as we go into the spoilery review, I'll start off with book 1, then I'll go into book 2, and then book 3. So if you haven't read it, you need to go read it first. You need to. Then come back and we can talk about it. Here we go in 3, 2, 1. So we have book 1, which is Dune. And I loved this because you're being introduced to all the characters. Someone who really stuck out to me was Jessica. She gives me such badass energy and it is so incredible the way she speaks, her intelligence, and especially that intelligence, you can see it rooted in Paul. Lady Jessica is so cool how she is connected to the Bene Gesserit. She has this way about her where she can understand behavioral cues. She knows what they're thinking, what they're about to do, and I find that epic. The Baron was the most hilarious character to read in this story. The way that he is held up by suspenders. You can just see the venom that he is such a villain. As this story went on, I actually grew to really enjoy his sections. You just really want him dead as you're reading this book. Paul is beautiful. I loved reading about his entire journey. How he had a dream of Shani, who comes up later on in the story. He dreamt of her blue eyes with no white in them, the Fremen. This story is so good because you have no idea where it's gonna go. It's continuously going in a direction that is not predictable. You can just see this interweaving of magic, this interweaving of fantasy elements in this story. It's carved with facts, with science. I almost felt like I could see a bit of climate change in here, the environment. There's so much symbolism, there's so much to unpack, and it's beautiful. So we have Yue, who was the doctor, and he had this secret role to kill the Baron, but it failed, and as a result, Paul's father, the Duke Leto, he died. I thought that was so heartbreaking because the Duke is incredible. He's strong. You can see that he really takes up his role. The fact that he died in that way was so sad. I hate that it was almost like the Baron faded off into the shadows and survived. He could just leave the room so perfectly and easily. I hate that. It makes sense why Yue would have wanted to do this because he wanted to avenge his lover. It's just so sad that he didn't succeed. Because there was this known of a traitor being amongst the group, many of them would turn to Lady Jessica thinking she was the traitor. That really pissed me off because I love Lady Jessica and I kept thinking in my head, it's not her, it's not her, you guys have no idea. So we end this section of the book with a huge plot twist that Lady Jessica is a Harkonnen, that she is the Baron's daughter. I remember I was reading that bit with my boyfriend. We looked at each other and went, oh! And it was just the cutest thing ever because like, what the fuck? So let's move on to the second section. We have Muad'Dib. This section was so epic because we get the worms in here. We get this imagery of these freaking worms that are huge. The worms are so scary. The way Frank describes their teeth, sharp like Cry's knives, like Jesus. How people would ride them and Paul ends up learning how to ride a worm. And this whole thing behind the spice, how the worms are protecting the spice, I think is so cool. So we have Liet Kynes as well, who is actually Shani's father, and he dies in this bit. And it's here where we meet Shani, which I think is beautiful. We get to meet the Fremen and become a part of the Fremen group. And it's here where we have the rise of Paul Muad'Dib. There are so many names being interwoven in here. Paul is sometimes called Azul, he's called Muad'Dib, and then obviously you then have the third section where he becomes the prophet. Like, he has so many titles and names, and it's really fascinating because if you're not paying attention, I guess you could miss these things, but you wouldn't miss these things because they're so pivotal and a part of the story. Paul is so young, yet he has so much power, and it's so beautiful to see him harnessing his power, that he's confident in his power, that he knows he's the Muad'Dib, he knows that he's the prophet eventually, he knows that he has been put on this planet to serve, and there is a higher purpose. I love that. You then have Paul's first kill, which is Jamis, and that whole ceremony after he kills him was very interesting. Something I really loved as a theme in this story was adding wealth to water, the importance of water. Water is literally like the way we spend money. It has this level of superiority to it. In this desert planet, sourcing water is so difficult and hard. I think it was Shani, how she was crying. The way they described it as if she's wasting water, how people would look at her like, how can you let yourself cry, you're wasting water. I love having this in here. I think it's so powerful. Paul just had his first kill, Jamis, and the ceremony was beautiful, how everyone had to come up and say something about Jamis, and Paul is there like, I don't know him. Like, I killed him. He's not exactly my friend. You have these water counters. Paul will forever carry these water counters with him because they're symbolic of the water that made up Jamis's body. Found that just so interesting because water is so desired. You then have the water of life, and this moment I think is fucking epic. The way Lady Jessica is having it, and she is watching herself literally become the Reverend Mother. But you then have this twist. She is carrying Duke Leto's child, his daughter. Her baby is also a Reverend Mother. Like, what? But whoa! The baby saw everything when she's born. She's beyond her years. Quite literally, the things she says just do not align with her age. Jessica becomes the Bene Gesserit Reverend Mother. It's just epic. And like I said before, Lady Jessica, she needs to be recognized. I actually think that she's one of my favorite characters in this story, as well as Paul. So I love that with this whole section, Paul does become Muad'Dib, who is the one who points the way. I really loved how there was a bit of a romance here with Paul and Shani, but this is something I love, that it wasn't overly cheesy. It wasn't what was driving this story or driving this plot, because that's not what this story is about. It's about the journey, the adventure. And I think it's beautiful to interweave romance into it, but not to make it this huge big deal. It doesn't have to be. So in saying that, I really loved what Paul would call Shani, calling her his Sihaya, desert spring, meaning she is the paradise to come. So let's move on to the third section, the prophet. And this is where Paul becomes the prophet. I like this story because we do get a huge time jump. Paul and Shani, they have a kid and they name their son after Paul's father, Leto. We have Gurney, who almost killed Lady Jessica because he thought that she was the traitor. And like I said, these moments just piss me off because Jessica is fucking awesome. Can everyone just take a step back? Oh my god. And then you have Paul, who drinks the water of life. He could have died doing this, but he didn't. And he ended up becoming the title that is mentioned at the beginning of this story. And we already knew that this is about Paul. He becomes, I don't even know how you say it, the Muad'Dib. I don't know if that's right. The one who can be at many places at once. But he becomes it finally because he's had this water of life and he has seen everything. Paul is so cool. He's so cool. He's definitely the best main character I think I've seen in a long time. And this is such an old story. It's very sad that Paul and Shani's son Leto died, and then you have the capturing of Alia by the Baron, who, don't forget, the Baron is still here wanting to be superior and put his power over everybody, and he just makes me laugh. I just know it's coming for him, you know. They captured Alia, and Alia, bless, she fucking kills the Baron with the gom jabber. It must be so avengeful because she can see everything. She knows everything. So she must be avenging her father, her mother, everybody. I remember reading it just thinking, I can't believe this happened in this book. What an epic moment. Howard, who is such an awesome character as well in this story, he died. And then you have the ending of this book. Paul is to wed the princess. And whilst Paul is in love with Shani, he has to marry the princess in order to keep his title, to keep this recognition in the people of trusting him to guide them. I also was a bit upset because you have Shani just on the side like, no. I wonder in the next books if Paul is going to stray off the path and maybe fall in love with the princess, maybe. And there are just so many epic characters that I didn't even mention in this story. There are so many, like Halleck, who is just a warrior, Thufir Hawat, who is the master of assassins, Duncan Idaho, who is just an epic sword master. This entire book was just epic. I definitely know I'm going to reread it in the future. I will be thinking about this story for the rest of my life. I'm so grateful to have read it, and I can't wait to see where it's going to go, what's going to happen with Paul, this journey, the intelligence here, the creativity here. I think that Frank Herbert is just a genius, that he is the definition of brilliant. He really is. If I had to choose my favorite part in this book, I think it would definitely have to be a tie between the first section and the second section, Dune and Muad'Dib, because there was so much there. The story is a work of art. I want to read it again. Like, just talking about it, I want to read it again. I can't wait to hear your thoughts. Please write down below and let me know what you loved in this story. Who was your favorite character? What was your favorite part? I don't think I have anything more to say. There's no more words because it's just so good. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I love doing these reviews for you guys. They're so much fun and I'm just so excited where this is gonna go. Don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more. I'll see you guys very, very soon. As usual. Bye!